Pope Francis was in the news during the weekend after the publication of a recent interview in which he revealed a surprising decision and affirmed his resignation in case of a medical emergency and entrusted it to one of the cardinals of the Vatican. This revelation marks a crucial moment in the Catholic Church, as it raises profound questions about its future leadership and direction. One of the most intriguing aspects of this potential transition is the figure of Cardinal Luis Tagle. His choice is far from arbitrary. He is not just any candidate for succession. Tagle has been at the center of some controversies and shares a close link with Pope Francis. His influence, his vision, and the circumstances surrounding his ascent add layers of complexity to what could be one of the most significant transitions in the history of the modern Church. The reactions within the religious community have been strong and divided. The Catholic Church is already facing ever smaller numbers in assistance and devotion, and this imminent change of leadership has caused intense discussions. Will this change unify believers or deepen existing divisions? And perhaps the most important thing is why Pope Francis places so much trust in Tagle. This change of leadership is undeniably unique. For more than a decade, Pope Francis has been a symbol of reform, defying long-term traditions and at the same time advocating for mercy, inclusion, and social justice. However, now, the people closest to him report something unexpected. They believe that his mission is complete. Yes, complete. He feels that the time has come for a new leader to guide the Church towards the future. In private conversations, Francis has expressed a deep peace with this decision. His mandate as Pope has not been devoid of immense challenges, from addressing internal crises within the Church to addressing global issues of social justice. His leadership has been put to the test over and over again. But despite these struggles, his unbreakable faith in the Church's ability to evolve and adapt has remained firm. The process of selecting a new pope follows the sacred tradition of a conclave, a secret meeting of cardinals where the next leader of the Catholic Church is elected. However, one cannot underestimate the influence of a rising pope. Many believe that Pope Francis has already drawn the path to continue, subtly guiding the Church towards a successor that aligns with his vision, one that embraces inclusion, modern relevance, and social awareness. Now, let us imagine a new leader intervening, not only to continue Francisco's work, but to revitalize it, driving the Church towards an era of greater compassion and unity. The moment of this possible transition is especially significant. An extraordinary event is taking place during the Jubilee of Hope, which Pope Francis began on Christmas Eve 2024, calling for renewal, reflection, and optimism in a world that faces unprecedented challenges. On that solemn night, Pope Francis opened the Holy Gate of the Basilica of San Pedro, marking the beginning of a global celebration intended to inspire faith and hope. The world did not know that this moment could also mark the final chapter of its revolutionary papacy. And, however, what makes this moment truly remarkable is not only its symbolism, it is the uncertainty of what follows. Those closest to Pope Francis affirm that he is at peace with his legacy. Not only has he led the Catholic Church, but he has redefined his leadership. Under his leadership, the Vatican has faced issues that were once taboo, addressed internal financial reforms, and played a crucial role in the global fight against climate change. His papacy has left an indisputable mark, but even when he resigns, he knows that there is still a lot of work to do. The transition of the papal authority is never easy. Rooted in centuries-old traditions, the process is at the same time deliberate and complex. Some speculate that Pope Francis may be following in the footsteps of Pope Benedict XVI, another modern leader who resigned instead of serving to death. If that is the case, this decision will be a decisive moment in Catholic history, one that we are witnessing in real time. Speculations around this transition are growing day by day. With this comes a mixture of emotion and uncertainty. But it is about something more than a new leader. It is about the future of the Catholic Church itself. As the next pope will address pressing issues such as the role of women, the inclusion of LGBTQ Catholics, and the current confrontation of the Church with clerical abuse. During a visit to Ireland, Pope Francis publicly recognized the mismanagement of child abuse cases within the Church and issued a wide apology. This moment of responsibility was a defining aspect of his papacy. Whoever follows him will not only inherit his mission, but will also have to forge his own path in a world in rapid evolution. Beyond his role as leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis has emerged as a global figure, a defender of social justice, environmental protection, and interreligious dialogue. His influence extends far beyond religious circles and touches politics, activism, and global humanitarian efforts. Now, as speculations about his departure intensify, the world wonders what comes next. One thing is certain: his resignation, if confirmed, will cause upheavals around the world, influencing everything, from the doctrine of the Church to international affairs. Within the Vatican, a silent urgency is growing. Reports suggest that, with the door closed, preparations are already underway for what could be one of the most transcendental announcements in modern history. The most important question remains: how will Pope Francis reveal his decision to 1,300 million Catholics, and how will his farewell be? Whoever assumes the next role will face an immense challenge, which will require a delicate balance between defending tradition and embracing progress. This very morning, Pope Francis addressed world leaders in the United Nations, making a passionate call for peace and global cooperation. His defense of human dignity and justice has defined his mandate, but while the Church is in a stalemate, its next leader will have to continue to navigate this thin line between preserving the past and shaping the future. Rumors within the Vatican suggest that the selection process may already be underway. The task of electing the next pope is in the hands of the Cardinal School, which will meet in the Sistine Chapel to issue its votes. This sacred process, wrapped in mystery and tradition, will determine the future of the Catholic Church. But one thing is undeniable: the influence of Pope Francis will be deeply rooted in the result. The cardinals he appointed reflect his vision of a more compassionate and progressive church. Now, the world is watching and waiting. Will his successor carry out his reforms or draw a completely new course? While the Catholic Church faces one of the most critical moments in its modern history, its next leader will have to do more than preserve the legacy of Pope Francis. He will have to redefine his own. Cardinal Tagle, a strong contender, is known for his unbreakable commitment to compassion, dialogue, and inclusion. Whether he or another candidate assumes office, the future of the Church is on the verge of transformation. And with that transformation comes an undeniable truth: the world is watching and history is written before our eyes. Cardinal Luis Tagle has an unusual ability to connect with people from all walks of life, whether interacting with world leaders at the highest levels of government, offering comfort to the refugees who face immense difficulties. His deep empathy and understanding of human struggles allow him to close the gap between faith and the challenges of real life that ordinary people experience all over the world. His approach to Catholicism is based on listening, adapting, and embracing the rich diversity of cultures, making the Church more accessible to communities that once felt distant from his teachings. This inclusive perspective has contributed significantly to the growth of the Church, particularly in regions such as Asia and Africa, where its presence continues to expand. However, leading a global institution as vast as the Catholic Church entails formidable challenges. The roles of leadership of Cardinal Tagle, both within the Vatican and as president of Caritas International, have demonstrated his ability to address pressing global problems, including poverty, migration, and climate change. His dedication to social justice and humanitarian efforts shows a vision of faith that goes beyond doctrine and directly impacts people's lives. However, his emphasis on social issues has not been without controversy. Some critics argue that focusing too much on these concerns risks eclipsing the traditional theological foundations of the Church. If Cardinal Tagle ascended to the papacy, one of his greatest challenges would be to ensure the conservative factions within the Church that their vision remains aligned with their fundamental spiritual and doctrinal principles. At the same time, he would have to continue to advocate a compassionate approach driven by action, one that addresses the realities of the modern world without ceasing to be deeply rooted in the Catholic tradition. Another critical test for Cardinal Tagle would be to define his leadership in a way that is not simply seen as an extension of Pope Francis' papacy. While his values and vision are closely aligned with those of the current pope, he would need to establish a different style of leadership that responds to the challenges of the 21st century. This means balancing continuity with innovation, ensuring that his approach resonates both among progressive and traditionalist members of the Church. Despite the possible obstacles he may face, There is no doubt that Cardinal Tagle has already left a deep mark on the Catholic Church. His tireless work with marginalized communities, his commitment to interreligious dialogue, and his efforts to modernize the Church's commitment to global problems have earned him deep respect both inside and outside the Vatican. Regardless of whether he finally becomes Pope, his legacy is already being shaped by his unbreakable dedication to faith, his defense of the most vulnerable, and his vision of a church that listens, adapts, and serves. However, the road to becoming Pope is not without complexities, and Cardinal Tagle faces several important obstacles. Among them is the competition of other candidates, the criticism of his performance in his country of origin, and his cautious approach to addressing issues related to China. One of the most prominent rivals he faces is Cardinal William Goh of Singapore, who, like Tagle, represents Asia and speaks English fluently, a great advantage as the Catholic Church moves its focus beyond Europe. Goh is also seen as a bridge between progressive and conservative factions, which could make him a more unifying candidate. While Tagle is widely recognized for his progressive stance, this same quality can also be a disadvantage when he appeals to more traditional segments of the Church. Tagle's reputation as a progressive leader is a double-edged sword. For a long time, he has defended the importance of hospitality and inclusion in the Church, particularly by defending marginalized groups, including LGBTQ Catholics. During the last decade, human rights activists have tried to link LGBTQ rights with the widest range of universal human rights recognized by the United Nations, and Tagle's opening to dialogue has made him a prominent figure in these discussions. At the recent AMD conference, Tagle warned against the dangers of allowing ethnic and cultural divisions to fracture the Church, while criticizing the emergence of populist movements that distort the true meaning of unity. These perspectives have been adopted by progressive Catholics, but they have also generated concern among the most traditional leaders of the Church, who fear that such points of view may move the Church too far from its established doctrines. Another reason for controversy is Tagle's approach to China. His reluctance to adopt a firm stance on the delicate relationship of the Church with Beijing has caused criticism, particularly while the Vatican continues to manage its position on religious freedom in China. Some believe that his cautious silence on this issue could weaken his chances of becoming Pope, especially in contrast to other candidates who may be more frank about these geopolitical complexities. In addition, Tagle's similarities with Pope Francis could be both an advantage and a disadvantage. His rhetoric is often echoed by the current Pope, particularly on issues such as migration and populism. Pope Francis has repeatedly emphasized the enrichment that migration brings to Western societies, advocating for policies that host and integrate migrants. Similarly, Tagle has warned against the rise of populism and has defended hospitality and inclusion. While these positions resonate among progressive Catholics, they also raise doubts as to whether Tagle would be seen as an independent leader or simply as a continuation of Pope Francis' legacy. To further complicate his possible candidacy are the criticisms of his term as Archbishop of Manila. The Manila Standard accused him of allowing the Church to get involved in party politics, particularly through its open opposition to former President Rodrigo Duterte. Detractors argue that Tagle's criticism of the government exceeded the traditional limits of religious leadership, incursioning into political activism. Some believe that this confusion between faith and politics could be problematic if the Pope took office, where diplomatic neutrality is crucial. Political analysts and religious commentators have also argued that Tagle's participation in political discourse risks undermining the role of the Church as a unifying spiritual institution. According to the Lagogo critic, Tagle allowed political rhetoric to be incorporated into his homilies, which many saw as direct attacks on Duterte's administration. These sermons with political weight caused divisions among Catholics, which generated concerns about whether he could maintain neutrality in a role that requires diplomacy and a broader focus on spiritual leadership. Ultimately, although Cardinal Tagle is undoubtedly an important figure in the Catholic Church, his path to the papacy is far from being safe. His ability to balance progressivism with tradition, navigate political complexities, and establish a different style of leadership from Pope Francis will determine his future in the Church. Whether he becomes Pope or not, one thing remains clear: his commitment to an inclusive, compassionate, and socially committed Church will continue to shape his direction in the years to come. Beyond his notable rise within the Catholic Church, Cardinal Luis Tagle has not been without controversy. An important point of criticism directed at him has to do with his perception of inaction regarding the bad conduct of the clergy during his term as archbishop. Detractors argue that he did not adopt a firm position when addressing these serious issues, which left persistent doubts about his ability to impose discipline and defend the moral authority of which the Church depends so critically. This concern has weight, especially at a time when the Church requires strong leadership, someone capable of maintaining strict ethical standards, and at the same time restoring confidence in an institution that has faced repeated scandals in recent years. The ability to face these challenges is crucial for any leader, especially for one considered aspiring to the papacy. However, perhaps the most formidable challenge for Tagle's leadership is his controversial silence on China. His refusal to publicly address the Vatican's treaties with the Chinese Communist Party, PCC, has fueled speculation, particularly while Pope Francis continues to seek a controversial agreement with Beijing. The 2018 Vatican Agreement, which allowed the Chinese government to participate in the appointment of bishops, has been widely condemned by many within the Church. Critics argue that such an agreement compromises the fundamental values of the Church when aligned with a notorious regime for the abuse of human rights and the suppression of religious freedoms. By remaining silent on this issue, Tagle is at risk of being associated with the growing reaction against the Vatican's relationship with China. Many believe that the Church should adopt a stronger and more open position in defense of the religious groups persecuted under Chinese rule, including Catholics, Uyghurs, and other minority communities. His lack of public comment becomes even more significant considering his influential positions within the Vatican. As former prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples and later key figure in the Dicastery for Evangelization, Tagle exercised considerable authority over the global missionary efforts of the Church, particularly in regions where Catholicism faces opposition, such as China. Despite this, he has remained notably reserved and refused to directly criticize the agreement between the Vatican and China. His cautious approach has not gone unnoticed, particularly given the geopolitical tensions surrounding his homeland, the Philippines, and his long-standing territorial disputes with China. Some speculate that his silence may be due to a reluctance to adopt a position that could provoke powerful global actors. However, for a figure who could someday assume the papacy, this hesitation raises serious doubts. A pope must be willing to face delicate political issues, speak with moral clarity, and remain firm in the face of adversity. As tensions in Asia continue to grow, the Church cannot afford the luxury of a leader who avoids crucial geopolitical challenges. Tagle's leadership in the Dicastery for the Evangelization from 2019 to 2022 placed him in a unique position regarding the agreement between the Vatican and China. Although he was not directly responsible for negotiating the agreement, his office had the task of ensuring the well-being of Chinese Christians during its implementation. His partial Chinese heritage adds another layer of complexity to his silence on the matter. Given his background and his role in the Church's commitment to China, many expected him to adopt a more open stance. Instead, his silent approach has left observers wondering whether he has the diplomatic assertiveness necessary to navigate the Vatican's delicate international relations. The urgency of this issue became even more pronounced with the trial of Cardinal Joseph Zen, one of the most open critics of the agreement between the Vatican and China. Zen, a prominent defender of religious freedoms, was to be tried on September 19th, a case that attracted worldwide attention. Although the trial was postponed, the situation marked a crucial moment in the relationship of the Church with China. Tagle's continuous silence during this period further deepened concerns about his will, or lack of will, to participate in high-risk moral debates. How he would handle equally controversial issues as leader of the World Catholic Church remains an open question. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has adopted a more conciliatory approach to China, trying to promote dialogue instead of confrontation. Reports suggest that during his visit to Kazakhstan, Pope even sought a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, a proposal that was finally rejected. Francisco has defended his diplomatic strategy, neglecting the criticisms of Cardinal Zen when he claimed that the old clergyman simply says what he thinks. However, this comedic approach of the Vatican has not been well received by all, and figures such as German Cardinal Gerhard Müller openly condemn the Church's hesitation in criticizing China's actions. Tagle's alignment with Pope Francis' approach places him in a precarious position. Some fear that his lack of will to adopt a definitive position may undermine the Church's moral authority, presenting him as a figure too tied to Francisco's legacy instead of an independent leader capable of drawing his own course. While Tagle is still a highly respected candidate for the Pope, critics argue that his ability to unite the factions deeply divided within the Church is uncertain. On the contrary, figures such as Cardinal William Goh of Singapore are considered more effective in closing the ideological gap between progressive and conservative Catholics. Despite these challenges, it is unlikely that Tagle's resignation to openly get involved in political controversies will completely derail his position among the cardinal school. However, his silence on the Vatican's relationship with China remains a worrisome concern, especially as scrutiny of the Church's dealings with Beijing continues to grow. His ability or his failure to address this issue could shape the perceptions of his leadership in the years to come. At the center of this moment is both a challenge and an opportunity. If Tagle can take a step forward, dialogue with critics, clarify his position on controversial issues, and demonstrate the necessary strength to lead a globally divided Church, he can still solidify his position as a serious contender to the Pope. His future is not yet written, and the decisions he takes now will determine his legacy. The Catholic Church is at a turning point. With the eventual resignation of Pope Francis on the horizon and figures such as Cardinal Tagle gaining prominence, the road ahead is uncertain, but it is also full of potential. The question remains, will Tagle be up to the challenges, or will persistent doubts about his past prevent him from leading the Church towards a new era? We want to hear your opinion. Is Cardinal Tagle the right leader for the future of the Church, or his actions or inactions raise too many unanswered questions? Share your opinions in the comments below. The journey is just beginning and the story is in process. Stay tuned for what comes next.